Welcome back, all our 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation, and today I'll be bringing you my list that we'll be taking on Lane in our next battle report. Those of you who know I've been getting my butt kicked lately. Marines are really that tough, and DeathWatch being able to just pick up so much of their army and bounce around the field, well, time to address an old saying, if you can't beat them, join them. But I won't be going into Adeptus Astartes. No. Games Workshop made sure to let us know that Grey Knights are not Adeptus Astartes. No, we are Adeptus Sanctus. We are completely different than Space Marines. And that's what I'll be bringing. I'm going to be bringing the Grey Knights. So if Lane wants to go up and down and pick up his units and put them down there, let me show you how it's done here, buddy boy. Yeah, that's right, buddy boy. We're going to be bringing the Grey Knights here. We're going to be bringing the new Warp Bane detachment as well, because I really like this one and what it gives to the Purifiers. And yeah, we're going to have some fun with this. So Necrons, I've been working on them a lot, and there's still some other armies I want to play. Bringing stuff out here on channel. Lane's going to be getting ready to go to a tournament soon. So there's going to be a couple other factions I want to throw at him. So I haven't brought Grey Knights for a little while. I feel very, very comfortable with Grey Knights. So much so that I've said, you know, if I'm going to a GT, this is what I take. I take Grey Knights. I take Grey Knights. And I've said it a couple times. So it definitely is time for me to put my money where my mouth is and bring the Grey Knights here today. This is also kind of going to be the list that I'm testing because, like I said, if I'm going to a tournament and I'm taking Grey Knights, this should be what I'm working on. Getting these guys cleaned up, getting these guys painted, getting them ready to go. So this is the draft/list that I probably would take in those scenarios. So before we go on any further and I start talking about all these different units, let's just talk about the list, show you what I'm bringing, and then we can dive deeper into what I'm hoping this thing's going to do. So, all right, let's take a look at this list. All right, here it is. 2,000 points are right on the button. Grey Knights of the Warp Bane detachment. So what this detachment does, we have the initial rule, the ability to pick up 3 units because it's a 2,000 point army, and put them into reserve and then drop them back in on the battlefield. Now, a little fun fact that I did note while Lane and I were looking at stuff is that you are picking this unit up, and then the unit is put anywhere on the battlefield 9 inches away. That is the teleport assault rule in all its inheritance. So I could technically take some Inquisitors and slap them on some battle line units, but there's not necessarily, and still pick them up, but there's not necessarily a lot that I want to do with them. It's just a little fun fact I wanted to throw out there in this list. Well, in this video, should I say. Now, like I said, the Warbane detachment, we can still pick up those 3 units and bring them back onto the battlefield. The entire army, because we're Grey Knights, everything in the army except for one little unit of servitors has the deep strike keyword as it is. And the added bonus that we get is the entire army gets reroll 1s to hit. Now, they can also get full rerolls to hit if they're on hollowed ground. To be on hollowed ground, the home field objective, or I'm sorry, the home field deployment zone is always considered to be hollowed ground. And then at the beginning of any phase, if we control at least half the objective markers in no man's land, or the objective marker in our opponent's deployment zone, or half in missions where you put more objective markers down, we consider that area hollowed ground, no man's land, or their opponent's deployment zone, respectively. Which means then all Grey Knight units will get full rerolls to hit. In addition, if you are wholly within 6 inches of a unit of Purifiers, you are also considered to be on hollowed ground and would get that full rerolls to hit, as well as access and some other stratagems and some other abilities and buffs that come with this detachment. So that means the Purifiers are considered always on hollowed ground because they are going to be wholly within 6 inches of their own buff. So let's get started. So first and foremost, we do have 3 Dread Knight chassis. 2 of these guys are going to be regular Dread Knights and 1 is a Grand Master. They're all exactly the same: Psy Cannon, Silencer, and Hammer. Now, some people said, why not go with the Incinerator over the Silencer? In this detachment specifically, that Silencer really shines. In the last couple games that I did run this detachment and I've run the Silencer, that sustained hits really finds its home in this detachment, being able to make all those rerolls and rerolling misses. You're able to gain a lot more value out of this and a lot more hits than you normally would. Now, the Torrent weapon is a good Overwatch threat, But we still do have the full rerolls to hit if we're in hollowed ground, which is really nice if we're going for that Overwatch type threat. And since it's the movement phase, we most likely will still be able to have that hollowed ground that we're sitting in, since the hollowed ground doesn't check to the beginning of the phase. So good chance that we could still have that full rerolls. On top of it, I do have someone else that I really would like to threaten with the Overwatch a lot more so than the Dread Knights per se in most scenarios. Now, the reason I take a Grandmaster, because the regular Dread Knights, in most people's minds, are far superior. They can fall back, advance, shoot, and charge, which means that they're just faster and better in most aspects, and they cost the exact same. But what I like about the Grandmaster is there's two things with him that make him a very unique tool that I like to make sure to have at least one in my army. Number one, he's a character, so he can take enhancements. And I will be putting the enhancement on him that lets me target a unit within 18 inches and count that unit as being in hollowed ground, which is nice for some other abilities and buffs. Now, granted, that's 10-point enhancement, and some of the reason I took this was because I had 10 points left to spend and nothing really I could do with it. Technically, I had 60 points left to spend, but again, even 60 points, there's not very much to do with it with what I was trying to do with other stuff. So the 10 points went to him for this ability. I do like it. It's nice because I can target something that might not be in hollowed ground to still get that full rerolls to hit. You know, for 10 points, it's not a terrible enhancement to have. But more so, he has two abilities. Number one, you get targeted with a stratagem that costs 2 CP and reduce it down to 1. He cannot reduce a stratagem down to 0. He can only reduce it down to a minimal of 1. This is nice for things like the interrupt, to be able to interrupt in combat with him can be actually pretty nice. So it's a decent utility piece to be able to use with him specifically. But moreover, it's his anti-vehicle, anti-tank destruction, monster destruction. When he's in combat with a vehicle or monstrous creature, once per battle round, I can elect to use this psychic ability, and he re-rolls all hits, wounds, and damage result going into that monster or vehicle. So that is a really big smack that he can put on something, and that's a big reason why I like having him, is because he's a nice tool to be able to get in position to potentially hit something that a lot of other stuff can't hit, especially since Grey Knights don't have a lot of anti-tank. Now, there is, out of this attachment, some other anti-tank options that I'm not taking right now, tricks with Razorbacks or using a Land Raider for full rerolls to hit. But in this, like I said, with this style and with the build that I'm playing, I like having him there to be able to be something that can threaten, charge, and crush things if it hits them. Moving on, we have the namesake of this with the hollowed ground and the Warpbane, and that is Purifiers. We are taking 3 squads of Purifiers. 2 of them are 10-mans, and 1 is a 5. The 5-man is going to have 2 side cannons with it. It's a simple 5-man squad. This is one that I can deep strike in to give me hollowed ground in another area. It's a 5-man that can do secondaries and stuff like that. A big part of this is I have a good amount of strength in some other things that are able to do damage and attack. So this is a Purifier or squad that can land, be able to give that hollowed ground buff to something else as it being only a 5-man, and still be able to have good damage output because Purifiers are just mean as they are. So all around, that 5-man is kind of a beacon in some ways for other units, as well as something that can do secondaries and such, and just be vicious as in its own right. I mean, you take one guy out and we're already at +1 to hit. Next, we have our 2 10-mans. So one of the 10-mans is going to have 4 side cannons with it and no character. This squad is another unit to kind of help with that hollowed ground when we are not able to get it in center field during the shooting phase, exactly when we need it, and also someone that we can piggyback another stratagem that allows us to drop a unit on wholly within hollowed ground and just outside of 6 inches of an enemy unit. It is a strat that allows us to still charge afterwards. So this is a unit that it's very nice to be able to piggyback with that. And we'll talk more about the units that I want to use kind of for that stratagem to be able to get that charge and how that's going to work and things I want to do with them. On top of it, this squad is great for holding center field. 1 CP, we can give this squad a 4-up invuln because the Purifiers have access to that strat. And this unit has 4 side cannons to just face something down and shoot good. After one guy gets removed, again, they can get +1 to hit. And because it's a 10-man, once this squad drops down to 4, they'll also have +1 to wound. So depending on what type of matchup we're going into, we can either go into the combat side or the shooting side of it and either have 4 side cannons that have +1 to hit, +1 to wound, or have 4 purifiers that have +1 to hit and +1 to wound in combat. And that has been very effective with that +1 to wound in combat, especially late into the game when they charge into tougher targets. Remember, all the Grey Knight weaponry, pretty much all the Grey Knight weaponry that is the combat focused side of things, is strength 6, AP 2, flat 2 damage, and usually comes in with at least 3 attacks. So there is a good amount of damage output, especially when we're like re-rolling hits and then +1 to wound and that strength 6. There's a lot of things that jump over to be able to make these guys really, really hit hard as they're getting beat up. And your opponent's like, okay, cool, they're down to just a handful of guys. Well, guess what? Those handful of guys just got real angry. And last of the 10-mans we have are basically our centerpiece squad, which is the Purifiers with 4 Incinerators and Castle and Crow. Purifiers are only allowed to be led by Castle and Crow, sadly. And at the same time, though, Castle and Crow gives one heck of a buff. So Purifiers all have a psychic shooting attack. So every one of these squads is going to get an additional shot that is strength 2, I believe, AP 1, 1 damage, but it is anti-infantry. It might be a different strength characteristic. I apologize if I'm wrong on that. But it is, I think it might be strength 4. But regardless, the kicker is that it's anti-infantry 2 up. This, for Castle and Crow squad, they get +1 to that shot, on top of the fact that they have the Incinerators. 4 Incinerators, strength 6, AP 1, 1 damage that are torrents. We have ignore cover as well on the Purifying Flame and ignore cover on the Incinerators. So these guys are able to shred infantry squads big time. And since they're re-rolling hits, it means we're going to get even more. We're going to guarantee pretty much that we're going to hit with all of the Purifying Flames plus the Incinerators. And then there is a strat that allows us to do a little bit better when we're going to wound if we choose to do that with the squad. So this squad just can absolutely hammer infantry. And again, as we said, once you start removing them, they just get tougher. You take one guy down, now we're hitting on 2s for the entire unit. Then we have all the Storm Bolters on top of it, which all the squads have the Storm Bolters on those guys, which on top with this squad is just more shots to put into an infantry unit. Any infantry unit that they don't absolutely just pick up off the battlefield, they will hurt so badly that that unit will have a very rough time during its next turn. On top of it, because of the fact that these guys Incinerators, because of them being in hollow ground and reroll to hit, these guys are a super, super, super good Overwatch threat, where anything that decides to try to move away from you or move closer to you, these guys can just absolutely burn them with so much Incinerator and Purifying Flame hate. They can really, really hurt a unit in the Overwatch as well. And they're probably one of my prime Overwatch threat units that can really control a good portion of the battlefield just by making your opponent have to make decisions on if they want to move or not. And in some scenarios, this can really mitigate our opponent because if they want to move, they get overwatched. They move away, they get overwatched. They move to you, they get overwatched. They stand still, they don't get overwatched, but then when they try to charge you, they get overwatched. So it's a constant threat to be able to have there. A little susceptible to shooting, but once again, we have that strat for a 4-up invuln, which is nice. And some of the damage that goes through to these guys, honestly, it powers them up in this sense too. So there's a lot to be said at these Purifiers, and they've been very good to me going into late games. Next up, we'll move over to the last of our character-led units, which is a 5-man squad of strike. Last time I was running a 10-man. The only issue with the 10-man I was having was the difficulty in being able to fully get them in hollowed ground to be able to use that strat to get within 6 inches. This is one of my prime target units for that stratagem for a couple of reasons. Number one, when we get them just outside of 6, got a good chance of making a charge, which means we can make a charge on almost any objective marker we want, as long as, other screening units aren't getting in the way. And that means that this is a unit that can really, really hit a unit on an objective marker. The Striker are able to start the game on the table to make my home field objective sticky, and they can also bounce around the field and make other objectives sticky until that moment comes when I want to drop them in with wholly within outside of 6 and within hollowed ground, and then charge my opponent. When these guys charge, they are OC2. Well, I'm sorry, they're OC2 regardless of the charge. But that's a big part of it. When they charge, they're going to be bringing OC2 onto that objective marker. I have these guys led by a Brotherhood champion, which means that the squad will have fight first. So whatever we hit, we have a very good chance of being able to remove or weaken to a point where they're not really able to hurt us back, and we take that objective away from our opponent. Now, do we hold it? Probably not. But we take it away from our opponent, can take away critical assets, can take away points, and can possibly score some secondaries that we might have had trouble elsewise, like engage on all fronts or behind enemy lines if we're going into our opponent's deployment zone. The Brotherhood champion, I also gave the enhancement that people love to put on a Tech Marine. I'm putting on him because, and I can't remember the name of the enhancement, but this is the one that gives him precision, which he already has, but it also gives him any successful wound rolls do 1 mortal wound in addition to any other damage they would normally do. Now, the reason people like doing this on the Tech Marine is because the Tech Marine has 8 attacks, but the Tech Marine is only a ballistic weapon skill of 3. So when you make that charge, if you don't have hollowed ground, you are not rerolling hits. While the Brotherhood champion, as long as he's fighting a character unit or a unit that has a character in it, so they have the character keyword, he is rerolling hits and wounds, which means that he has very, very good reliability to be able to get those mortal wounds through and be able to at least get the 5 attacks to have 5 mortal wounds. The Tech Marine can go much hotter, obviously, because he has 8 attacks. So if you do get the reroll hits, then as long as you get more than 5 wounds, you obviously have more there. But having that fight first on top of still having that reliability behind how much damage he can put out there is some value that I really like to have. I mentioned before the enhancement that gives count as hollowed ground. That's a good one to use for this unit, which also would kind of go well with the Tech Marine too. And given the fact that I have Dread Knights, the Tech Marine might seem like the better choice, but that fight first is such a crucial mechanic that I really like having, and I really feel comfortable having that in a majority of my Grey Knight lists that I've been in the last couple of iterations. Moving on, we have 2 5-man squads of interceptors. Now, the Strike were all fitted with just close combat weapons. I didn't mention that. These guys have a single side cannon in each unit. It's kind of just, you feel better having it than not. If the unit loses a guy, I can pick the side cannon up if I really feel like I won't need it. But the side cannon at 2 damage, 3 shots, strength 9, AP 1 is just a good gun to have, especially considering we don't pay points for guns. So it's nice to have it to be able to shoot, especially because a lot of this unit's function is the fact that it can shoot, then move in the shooting phase. They have a base 12-inch move, so they're very, very quick. And these guys, again, can just shoot something and then move an additional 6 inches to get them further and deeper into the game. This is a unit that is really good for being able to steal objective markers too, because we can land just outside of 9 and then shoot something and move that 6 inches and potentially get onto an objective that we weren't normally able to get onto because we were getting zoned out. So this unit's able to do a lot and has a lot of versatility behind what it's able to do. And because of that 12-inch move, it's also able to get further on board in the early points of the game in a situation where we might go first and have to make some moves. These are units that can do that and allow us to play the game. We might lose them in some scenarios depending on some secondaries we draw, might lose one of them, but at least we have them, and it's definitely a thing of I feel better having them than I would going without them and completely bypassing and not being able to score anything on turn 1. In some scenarios, they might just go around the outside and be able to get to a second objective to be able to score some simple secondaries for me or just open up my field, since a lot of my army is built around teleporting around. But this is at least a unit that can do that stuff on turn 1. Next up, we'll jump into the Purgation squad. So we got a 5-man squad of Purge, all with side cannons. These are kind of a new/old addition. I've been kind of moving some models around, so I'm adding a couple more things to the mix. And these are some of my psi cannons. So, psi cannon Purge. Purge, their ability is to fire indirectly as long as another unit can see the unit they're shooting at. Arguably, I've said this before, that is probably the way that indirect fire should be across the board. Like, I know there's a lot of nerfs and a lot of things changed. I think the Purgation squad is kind of how it should be for basically every army. If you is like having spotters and spotter units kind of makes sense. Well, that's what the Purge do. So as long as I can see a unit with another Grey Knights unit, then the Purge can shoot even if they can't see it. This means that the Purge are able to sit on an objective marker, possibly a little further back, being in a position to complete secondaries and hold that objective, as well as still contribute into the battle. Now, granted, the psi cannon's only AP1, so that AP isn't going to matter because units are going to get cover, of which they're not going to, so they're going to be on their base save. But it is still flat 2 damage, 3 shots apiece, and given the fact that we have these guys on hollowed ground, now we're looking at full rerolls to hit, so it's a lot more volume of attacks to make our opponent fail saves and possibly take that flat 2 damage per failed save. So these guys actually have a lot better home out of this detachment than they mostly do out of the standard detachment. I've considered putting in more, but I think it kind of weakens what I'm able to do here with them, and I think 1 is right where just fine where we're at for it. Being able to have that 1 unit do this because of how much I need other units to do other jobs. Now, with that being said too, and late in the game when I pick these guys up and can land right in someone's face, now you have 4 psi cannons that are able to just shoot right into someone's face, right down the barrel, no cover at all. And again, with full rerolls to hit possibility, they can just absolutely burn through things. So I do really like the Purge. I think, like I said, they do very well at this detachment, and they fit that role, and they help with the list overall to be in a position and do their job while still contributing on the battlefield and helping zone out the backfield in some ways. Now, one other key thing is there's a strat in this detachment that allows me to target a unit, and if I'm fully within hollowed ground, give a unit -2 to their charge. So in situations, and this I do love, because I've used this, when someone deep strikes in with a unit that has reroll charges, and they land just outside of 9, and they're looking at that 9-inch charge, I can now turn that 9-inch charge into an 11-inch charge. Most likely they're going to fail that, even on the real rolls. They're going to need 11 or a 12. I like that. This means that the Purge gets to sit there and can also get away after that turn resolves. Really, really super crucial. I mean, and then again, if that unit isn't that durable, I can just move over there and shoot them down. But it's a very nice strat, and it works very well for these guys specifically, because they're probably going to be spending a lot of their time on an objective on in or around hollowed ground. And last is really nothing that special. This is last but is least, is when you don't know what else to spend points on, you take servitors. 4 servitors, 2 multi-meltas. Why multi-meltas and not psi cannons? 1, modeling purposes, because I have the way I have them modeled. And 2, I don't really see myself ever even sticking these guys' head out or popping out to even shoot. Because if I pop their head out to shoot, they'll probably do no damage, and then they'll just get blown away. These guys have a very specific job. Once I sticky that home field objective marker, they're just going to hang out there and zone that objective out and make sure that my opponent cannot deep strike and just land on my objective. That's it. That's their whole job. Honestly, if it costs points for the multi-meltas, I wouldn't even take them. But I just took the multi-meltas because I have them already on the models. And hey, it's a multi-melta. If someone does get close and I get a couple shots with it, I get 2 shots per guy, cool. If I accidentally hit and wound, I mean, that's D6 damage right there, or maybe melta range. But for the most part, these guys are in there because they're 50 points and can just zone out a backfield while my more expensive, more valued units continue to progress and play the game. So that is the list. So as I mentioned multiple times in there, I have a lot of units that are a lot of small units able to do the secondaries. Then I got some big bulky units able to do a lot of the damage. One thing that we noticed during the last game when I played against Lane with Custodes, that he massively removed my Dread Knights and took a ton of damage, my damage, I should say, off the table early on. And what kept me in the game was the Purifiers. So we doubled down into that and kind of boosted into the Purifiers. There has been a lot of talks with kind of using Razorbacks, and I've seen it. Now I've looked into the combo. I put together a couple lists with it. I messed with it a bit. And number one, I don't feel as much comfort with it. Let's talk about what the combo is first. So, because I missed this entirely, and thank you to those who, when I said I'm like, I feel like I'm missing something, people educated me and pointed my eyes in the right direction for what I was missing, and it was right in front of my face. The Razorback allows any unit that disembarks from it that turn can have reroll wounds against a unit that was hit by a shooting attack from the Razorback itself. So what you do is you take a las cannon, per se, a Stormbolter, Hunter Killer. And the key thing is that Stormbolter. The Stormbolter shoots at whatever target you want the unit disembarking to shoot at. Then you shoot everything else wherever else, doesn't matter. If Purifiers get out, they're giving the Razorback full rerolls to hit. So if you take that las cannon, you're rerolling hits and rerolling wounds because it's twin linked. It's pretty nice. I like that. I like that a lot. But one of the things that a lot of people are looking at is the servitors. You know, you take a servitor, you attach Tech Marine to it, and then you're allowed to attach 4 more servitors to it, because the way the servitors work is if a unit is led by a Tech Marine, you can attach a unit of servitors to that unit one time. So the unit that's being led by the Tech Marine is servitors, then the servitors attach. So it's completely legal, and you can take 2 4-man servitors and join them into one. As long as the Tech Marine is leading one, you join the other. So that means you then can get 4 multi-meltas in that squad. So now with that, I guess that really wouldn't work because you can't disembark from the vehicle with 4 multi-meltas in that sense. But if you take the multi, because it's only transport capacity 6. But if you take the multi-melta, if you do take a 4-man, bring out 2 multi-meltas out of it or something like that, you can shoot. And which a lot of people were saying they doubled up on it. I'm not sure how they're doing that. I'll double check the capacity, but as far as I know, the Razorback's only transport capacity 6. So you wouldn't be able to take that, and you wouldn't be able to do that because it wouldn't be able to disembark. And I'm just realizing that now as I'm thinking about it. But regardless, you could disembark 1 squad with 2 multi-meltas and have full rerolls to hit. And then you have a second, I guess you have a second squad that you can disembark. You could disembark servitors and they get full rerolls to hit and full rerolls to wound because of being a Grey Knights unit, because they are Grey Knights unit within hollowed ground. So you'd have to be within hollowed ground, you get the reroll hits, and then they shoot and you get the rerolled wounds. Okay, cool. But here's the kicker. Razorbacks are not that durable. They're toughness 9, like 10 wounds, and if your opponent knows it's coming, they're going to pick off those ones. Now, granted, you can still pick up the unit and physically deep strike it down because the Tech Marine has deep strike. So you then can pick the servitors up and deep strike them and have them still be able to shoot their multi-meltas at reroll hits. But you're losing the critical reroll wounds, because anyone who's fired a multi-melta, that's strength 9, when you shoot at a toughness 10 and up vehicle, wounding on 5s, it gets significantly underwhelming when you get to that point. The reroll wounds is what makes it very, very, very much more efficient. And then to be able to get that melta damage as well. When you're deep striking, you're not getting that melta damage. So there's a lot of pieces that kind of seem like it still is a little clunky and not as reliable. Now, in some scenarios, that list and that style could probably bowl over a lot of things. I mean, early game, you have Razorbacks in your home field deployment zone, in your home getting hollow ground and re-rolling hits without the Purifiers disembarking or without anything disembarking. And then as you progress across the field and you need to make assaults on objective markers, you have units that are able to disembark and gain full rerolls to hit and full rerolls to wound, disembarking from the Razorbacks. I mean, the Purifiers alone having full rerolls to wound and with incinerators or side cannons can be pretty brutal when going into these targets. A lot of hopes that maybe you're able to do this before you move the Razorback and can then move the Razorback and just keep it in position so you could then charge afterwards. That would be pretty brutal. But it's a lot of ifs. And with the Razorback game being very light as it is, and only being able to take like 3 squads of Purifiers, I don't feel as strong and safe with it. I mean, granted, yes, I don't own rhinos and razorbacks. I need to get rhinos and razorbacks for my Grey Knights for other catapulting strategies. I don't own them, and I need to. But regardless of that, it just doesn't feel, it feels like there's a lot of scenarios where that's something that can get really corralled, especially with what Space Marines are doing right now. It feels like a weaker version of what Iron Hands have done in the past. And it feels like a light version, like a softer version. And while there's some damage output and some cool damage output and tricks that it can do, with what I'm trying to do is also going into the Grey Knight army for what it does more. The teleporting around and being able to take the points that would be spent in Razorbacks and spend it in more powerhouse units like the Purifiers, being able to take them from 5-mans to 10-mans and have that extra boosted power on the field. Not to mention we got Dread Knights, and Dread Knights still are nasty, mean, nasty hitting things. And with those rerolls to hit, that makes that side cannon so brutal. I mean, if we're getting rerolls to hit with a side cannon and those 6 shots, and it's strength 10 going into that same toughness 10 vehicle, we're wounding 4 ups. AP2, ignore cover, flat 3 damage. That flat 3 damage gets nasty real fast. And those Dread Knights can just look at things and just start picking up transports real fast. When we get over into the higher toughness vehicles, yeah, they're not doing as well because they need 5s to wound, but now we're re-rolling hits, so at least we have that going for us to be able to get more hits and more chances to go for those 5s or 6s for the flat 3 damage. I mean, I know that with the Doomstalkers that I like to run out of Necrons, granted a higher strength characteristic, that flat 3 damage really starts adding up real quick when those things start going through. So there it is. That's my list. We'll see how this does going into lane. Going to have quite a bit of my army off board because we are going to have a bit in deep strike because we need to make sure that we have those units that are able to come in. And then when we do pick up our units and start dropping it on turn 2 and do our turn 2 deep strikes, we're able to have a very strong, efficient hit. Granted, if I end up going second, I can pick units up on turn 1. But with this detachment and not having first to the fray and being able to drop in on turn 1, a lot more of the army is going to be more staging to get ready for those later turns and play into those later turns. We're not an alpha strike, we're more of a beta strike. We go in there, turn 2, we let our opponent play their hand. We might move the Dread Knights out to get some shooting and just put a little bit of heat out there and then start playing it in later. I don't like not having Mistademos and the Sigil of Exigence. I do miss those enhancements a lot, but man, reroll hits, that's a heck of a trade. All right, guys, well, that's it for my list today. Tune in and see how we do going into the DeathWatch. Lane's going to be bringing that DeathWatch and that he's been getting ready for tournament, so it'll be nice. It'll be a good, strong, solid Marine on Psychic Marine matchup. All right, that's everything. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.